What if boredom is the missing ingredient in your breakthrough? Think about it. Today, the moment you feel even 5 seconds of boredom, your hand automatically reaches for your phone. Scroll, swipe, check, repeat. It's almost unconscious. And the world has trained us to believe that boredom is a problem, something to run away from, something that means you're unproductive or wasting time. But what if boredom is actually the doorway to the life you've been praying for? Let me tell you something I discovered. The greatest ideas that changed my life didn't come when I was glued to a screen. They came in silence. They came in the in-between moments, when nothing was happening, when I was bored. And the more I reflect on it, the more I realize boredom isn't the enemy. Constant stimulation is. Because when you're always distracted, your brain never gets to rest. And when it never rests, it never creates. You become a consumer of other people's ideas instead of the creator of your own. That's why boredom feels uncomfortable to most people. It's not the boredom itself, it's the confrontation with silence. It's the moment you face your own thoughts. But here's the truth. Boredom is where creativity is born. It's where you stop reacting to the noise and start listening to the whisper of your own ideas, your own spirit, and even God's direction. Science even backs this up. Neuroscientists say that when your brain isn't occupied with constant stimulation, something called the default mode network activates. That's the system in your brain responsible for imagination, problem solving, and vision. It's like your inner workshop. But if you never allow boredom, you never turn that workshop on. You never build anything new. And spiritually, it makes sense too. Why does the Bible emphasize rest? Why did God establish the Sabbath? Because silence and stillness aren't wasted. They're sacred. It's in the quiet that vision comes. It's in the stillness that clarity arrives. But here's the problem with society today. We treat boredom like failure. If we're not busy, not entertained, not stimulated, we panic. We've been programmed to avoid the very space where transformation happens. And that's why so many people feel stuck, burned out, or uninspired. They're filling their time with noise, but starving their soul of space. So I want to challenge you right now. What if, instead of reaching for your phone the next time boredom hits, you leaned into it? What if you allowed your mind to wander, to drift, to dream? What if you gave yourself permission to be bored? Because what you'll discover is this: boredom isn't the absence of something. Boredom is the presence of space. And space is what allows new life, new ideas, and new direction to emerge. And that brings me to the next big idea we're going to unpack together. Boredom creates space. When I say boredom creates space, I mean it literally opens up a container for creativity, vision, and clarity to flow in. Think about it. Everything in nature needs space to grow. A seed doesn't sprout if it's suffocated. A tree can't stretch upward if it's surrounded by concrete. Even your lungs can't fill if you never exhale. Boredom is like that exhale. It empties out the noise so your mind and spirit have room to expand. But here's the trap. Our world has confused stimulation with progress. We think being busy equals being productive, but that's not always true. Many times, busyness is just avoidance. It's running away from stillness because stillness forces you to face what's inside. When you're bored, your brain is actually doing some of its most important work. Neuroscience calls this the default mode network. It's the state your brain enters when you're not actively focused on a task. And in this state, your brain connects dots you didn't even know were related. Ideas click, solutions appear, visions for the future rise up. But if you never give yourself the gift of boredom, you shut that entire system down. You never let your mind wander. You never let your spirit breathe. And here's the fascinating part. Some of the greatest inventions, works of art, and breakthroughs came from moments of wasted time. Einstein used to sit and stare out the window for hours. He called it thought experiments. In reality, he was giving his mind space. And it was in that space he connected the dots that led to theories that changed the world. In the Bible, we see the same pattern. Moses didn't encounter God's burning bush while running through Egypt's palace halls. He encountered it in the wilderness, alone, bored, watching sheep. David didn't write psalms in the middle of battle. He wrote them in fields lying under the stars with nothing but silence around him. Even Jesus pulled away from the crowds, often to go into the quiet places to pray. Over and over again, God reveals himself in the space, not the noise. So why do we run from boredom? Because space feels uncomfortable at first. Your mind starts itching for a fix. That's why we grab our phones. That's why we turn on background noise. We're terrified of silence. But here's the paradox. The silence we fear is the very soil that produces the fruit we've been praying for. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you noticed that your best ideas often come in the shower, or while driving, or lying awake before bed? That's not an accident. Those are the rare moments when you're not filling your brain with input. That's boredom doing its job. That's space creating clarity. So what if you stopped running from boredom? What if you embraced it instead? What if you saw those moments, not as wasted time, but as incubation time? Personally, this truth shifted everything for me. There was a season when I thought productivity meant never wasting a second. Every gap I filled with my phone. Every pause I filled with distraction. And the more I did that, the more drained I felt. My creativity dried up. My spirit felt dull. But when I started allowing boredom back into my life, walking without headphones, journaling without an agenda, sitting quietly in prayer instead of filling the silence with words, I noticed something. Space started producing ideas. Silence started producing strength. What I thought was wasted time became the most valuable time. Here's the principle I want you to catch. Boredom creates space, and space is where your future is formed. Now, in the next part, I want to show you exactly what happens inside that space. Because it's not just empty time. It's the place where the mind and spirit build momentum. And once you understand how to harness it, boredom will stop being an enemy and start being one of your greatest allies. Boredom fuels creativity because it's the blank canvas of the mind. When nothing is distracting you, when no input is constantly bombarding you, your imagination finally gets room to paint. That's why children are naturally creative. They spend hours in so-called boredom, turning sticks into swords and empty boxes into castles. Their minds take the emptiness and fill it with possibility. But as adults, we've lost that ability. And it's not because we're less creative. It's because we never allow boredom anymore. Here's the hard truth. Our phones are killing our creativity. Science shows that every time you pick up your phone and scroll, you get a tiny hit of dopamine. It's the same brain chemical that makes gambling addictive. And the more you do it, the more your brain rewires itself to crave the next hit. You don't sit with your thoughts anymore. You don't let your mind stretch or wander. Instead, you're always reacting to posts, to comments, to notifications. And when you live in a reactive state, you lose the ability to be reflective. Reflection is where creativity happens. Reflection is where you ask, what do I really want? What problem could I solve? What story is inside me that hasn't been told yet? But if your brain is constantly fed with stimulation, those questions never get asked. And if they never get asked, the answers, your creative breakthroughs, never appear. That's why boredom is so powerful. It feels uncomfortable at first because you're detoxing from that dopamine cycle. Your brain screams, do something, check something, fill this silence. But if you resist that urge, something shifts. The longer you sit in boredom, the more your brain starts to activate deeper networks. You begin to think differently. You start seeing connections you never noticed before. Let me give you a real example. Writers often say their best ideas come when they're not writing, while walking, washing dishes, or staring into space. Why? Because in those boring moments, the brain starts weaving together everything they've absorbed. Suddenly, the missing piece falls into place. The same thing happened in my own life. Some of the best breakthroughs for my business, and even this channel, didn't come while I was grinding at my desk. They came in silence, often when I was doing nothing. The Bible echoes this truth. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is more than rest, it's access. It's in stillness that vision sharpens, creativity flows, and faith deepens. Look at how often Jesus withdrew from the crowds. Before his biggest miracles, he sought quiet. He understood the principle. Noise drains clarity, space fuels it. So here's the principle I want you to catch. Boredom isn't wasted time. It's incubation time. Phones kill creativity because they trick you into believing you're feeding your mind, but in reality, you're suffocating it. Boredom fuels creativity because it gives your spirit and brain the oxygen they need to spark new fire. If you want to live a life of vision, you have to make room for it. And that room comes from embracing boredom. The next time you're tempted to reach for your phone in a quiet moment, stop. Let the discomfort sit. Because right behind that discomfort is often the idea, the vision, or the clarity you've been waiting for. And this leads us to something even deeper. Boredom doesn't just create creativity, it creates vision. It clears the fog so you can see the road ahead. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Vision is not something you stumble into by accident. It's something revealed in silence. And boredom, as uncomfortable as it feels, is often the space where that vision shows up. Think about Abraham. God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars. But how did that vision come? It didn't come while Abraham was distracted, busy, or consumed by noise. Genesis says God took him outside at night, under the empty sky, and told him to look up. In the stillness, in the quiet, God gave him a vision of his future. A man with no child was told to see nations. Vision was born in silence. The same happened with Joseph. Before he ever became second in command in Egypt, before the wealth and influence, he was given dreams as a young boy, dreams that came in the quiet of the night. God planted vision while Joseph was still unknown, still invisible. That vision carried him through betrayal, prison, and years of waiting. Without vision, Joseph would have given up. With vision, he endured until the promise became reality. Even Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness before launching his public ministry. No crowds, no stage, no applause, just stillness, silence, and struggle. But in that space, his vision sharpened. He came out of the wilderness knowing exactly who he was, what he was called to do, and the authority he carried. This is the pattern. Boredom isn't empty, it's pregnant with vision. But you have to stay long enough in the silence to hear it. History shows this too. Isaac Newton discovered the laws of motion and gravity during a time when he was forced into isolation, away from university because of the Great Plague of London in 1665. It was in that boredom, in the stillness of being away from normal life, that he noticed an apple falling from a tree and asked the question that changed science forever. Vision requires stillness. Or think of Nikola Tesla, the man whose ideas shaped modern electricity. He once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude. Be alone. That is the secret of invention." Even the greatest inventors knew. Silence births vision. And here's the truth we forget. Phones rob us of this process. Every scroll, every swipe, every notification pulls your attention outward and keeps you in reaction mode. Vision requires reflection, but phones trap us in reaction. They give us a constant feed of other people's visions, leaving us blind to our own. That's why boredom feels painful now. It's detox from overstimulation. But once you push through that discomfort, you'll realize boredom is the womb of vision. When you allow space, when you stop numbing silence, ideas start connecting. Problems you've been wrestling with suddenly unravel. Directions you've been asking God for start to become clear. And sometimes, vision doesn't shout, it whispers. It waits for the moment you put everything else down so you can finally hear. So here's the challenge. The next time you feel bored, instead of asking, "How can I kill this boredom?" ask, "What vision is trying to be born here?" Because boredom doesn't kill dreams, it delivers them. And that brings us to the next breakthrough we need to unpack. How boredom creates not just vision, but the discipline to act on it. Here's the thing about vision. It's useless without discipline. And boredom is actually the training ground where discipline is forged. Most people think discipline comes from motivation. They wait until they feel inspired, until they feel ready, until there's a big emotional push. But the truth is, real discipline is born in the quiet, in the boring, in the repeated daily choices nobody sees. Boredom becomes the fire that hardens your commitment. Look at Daniel. He lived in Babylon, surrounded by distractions, temptations, and constant pressure to conform. But what made him stand out wasn't just his wisdom, it was his discipline. Daniel prayed 3 times a day, every day, no matter what. Even when praying could have cost him his life, he didn't stop. That kind of discipline doesn't come from hype or motivation. It comes from choosing consistency even when it feels boring, even when nothing seems to be happening. Or think about Paul. Most of the letters in the New Testament, the writings that shaped Christianity, weren't written while Paul was traveling or preaching in the spotlight. They were written in prisons, in long seasons of waiting, in the boring and hidden places. That's where discipline did its work. Instead of complaining or giving up, he wrote, he prayed, he pressed on. His discipline and boredom created words that still impact us thousands of years later. And here's where it hits home. Most people can get excited about vision for a week. They can stay motivated for a season. But the ones who break through are those who learn to stay steady when things get boring. Success is never built on constant excitement. It's built on boring fundamentals, repeated long enough to create mastery. This is why boredom is such a gift. It trains you to stick with the process even when the feeling fades. It forces you to build habits instead of chasing highs. It creates the discipline that makes vision possible. Now let's bring this into modern life. You want to get in shape? The real progress doesn't come from the first week when you're hyped about your new gym membership. It comes 6 months later when you're showing up at 6 a.m. even though nobody's cheering. You want to build a business? The real breakthrough doesn't come from the exciting launch day. It comes from the 100 boring tasks in between. Emails, follow-ups, spreadsheets that nobody applauds, but all build momentum. Even science agrees. Neuroscience shows that habits are formed by repetition. The more you repeat an action, the more your brain wires itself to expect and execute that behavior automatically. But repetition is boring, which is why boredom is the very soil discipline grows in. If you can endure the monotony, you can build the mastery. Bruce Lee said it best, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." That's discipline. That's the power of embracing boring repetition until it becomes unstoppable mastery. And here's the paradox. The people who run from boredom also run from discipline. They jump from one thing to another, chasing excitement but never building mastery. They confuse activity with progress. But the ones who embrace boredom build strength that lasts. So let me ask you, what's the boring thing you've been avoiding? What's the simple, consistent action that feels too small, too repetitive, too unimpressive, but deep down you know it would change your life if you stuck with it? That's where your discipline needs to grow. Because boredom isn't empty, it's training. And if you let it, boredom will shape you into a person of vision, consistency, and strength. And that's where we're going to land this. Boredom isn't your enemy, it's your ally. It creates space, fuels creativity, births vision, and shapes discipline. In other words, boredom isn't holding you back. It's preparing you for the breakthrough you've been asking for. So here's the truth. Boredom isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. It's your ally. And if you've been running from boredom your whole life, maybe that's why you've also been running from the very breakthroughs you've been praying for. Because boredom creates space. It fuels creativity. It sharpens vision. It builds discipline. In other words, boredom is not the absence of progress, it's the soil of it. The very place you've been avoiding is the place where your future is waiting to be born. But here's the problem with most of us. We're addicted to stimulation. We want the next scroll, the next like, the next ping, the next distraction, and we confuse that with living. But deep down, you and I know that constant stimulation isn't life, it's escape. It's running away from the silence where God speaks. It's drowning out the whisper that carries your true assignment. When I look back at my own journey, I see it so clearly. The seasons where I embraced quiet, where I leaned into the boredom, were the seasons where my biggest breakthroughs came. Ideas I couldn't force, answers I couldn't figure out, directions I couldn't plan, they all arrived in the silence. And every time I fought boredom, every time I numbed it with distractions, I stayed stuck. And I believe the same is true for you. The boredom you've been avoiding might be the very preparation God has been waiting for, because it's in the silence that your spirit wakes up. It's in the quiet that your mind finally connects the dots. It's in the space that discipline, vision, and creativity come alive. So here's my challenge to you. The next time boredom comes, don't run from it. Don't reach for your phone. Don't numb it away. Sit with it. Let it stretch you. Let it do its work. Ask yourself, what's trying to be born in this silence? What vision is waiting on the other side of this boredom? What discipline is being forged while nobody's watching? And if you're brave enough to lean in, you'll find something shocking. The boredom you feared wasn't empty at all. It was full. Full of the answers, ideas, and directions you've been searching for. Because at the end of the day, your future won't be built on how well you can keep yourself entertained. It will be built on how willing you are to embrace silence, to endure repetition, to practice discipline, to sit with God in the stillness and let Him shape your vision. So the next time you feel boredom creeping in, remember this. You're not wasting time. You're planting it. You're creating the space where breakthrough lives. The question is, will you keep running from boredom, or will you finally let it shape you into the person you were created to be?